this session. I hope I can share some really interesting stories with you that will lead to lessons that will help make your MVPs better. And I definitely will have time for Q&A afterwards, so hopefully get some thoughts from you and make this a two-way discussion. As I said earlier today, it's not just coming up with an MVP, I think it's actually coming up with an MAP, minimum awesome product, not just a minimum viable product. And here's why I think it's really important to think about that. I have found in my career, starting many different kinds of businesses, all the way back from when I was selling candy at the bus stop at junior high school, to making loudspeakers when I was in college, to my first software businesses, to my first companies at Idealab, to Knowledge Venture, where we made educational software, that there's a fundamental logic or law about making products or selling services. It's very, very hard to convince somebody to buy something for less than your profit. And let me give you my example of that. Let's say at Knowledge Venture, we were making multimedia CD-ROMs, and the manufacturing cost of the CD-ROMs plus the packaging was $10, and we were selling them for $39.95 in the retail stores. So the retail stores were paying us $19.95, so we made $10 on each unit. Well, it's very, very hard to convince someone to buy that product for less than $10, meaning your marketing cost is almost always more than your marketing cost, your customer acquisition cost, whatever, is almost always more than your profit, which leads to, well then, how could you possibly make a business? Well, you've got to find some way to get that marketing cost, or that customer acquisition cost, or that ability to get a customer to use your product to be less than your possible profit. And that needs some degree of awesomeness. That needs some degree of breaking through the noise, or differentiation, or something that stands out from the competition. I often say you want to try and stand out from your competition by maybe more than a factor of 10 to 1. And that's very, very hard to stand out by more than 10 to 1. But part of the reason why you need to stand out by that much is because people just don't want to get up off their asses and switch to something different unless you really, really stand out. And also, if you think you're going to stand out by 10 to 1, by the time you get to market, because competition is also moving, and because there might be competitors you don't know about when you're planning your 10 to 1, the gap is probably going to be collapsed to only 3 to 1, because other people are going to have moved ahead in that time interval. So it just means that you really need to have something that's pretty astonishing, pretty bold, to really make it. And that's where the whole MVP or MA process comes into play, which is your chance to find out if you have that. It's often called product market fit, but I actually think it's some degree of astonishment fit, meaning can you really get people to come to you at a greater rate than the expenditure that you're making to get them to come. And I think that's a very, very important thing to test. And when you can test that cheaply enough, you can save a lot of money. And you can iterate, you have a chance to use the limited money that you do have to iterate to actually get to that point. Sometimes it's not the thing that you think that gets people there. So I want to tell you some stories about times that I didn't get there, times that I did get there, and what I learned from those. And maybe there'll be some little lesson that you can abstract out to apply to your particular case. But obviously, it's so great to have this fantastic turnout. Every one of you has a different situation, so I can't individually address every one of you, but I hope I touch upon things that you're trying to achieve and that can be beneficial to you. So to start out with, I told you the Cars Direct story about, I'm going to jump forward to some of these different, this list here. The Cars Direct story was finding out if other people wanted to buy a car the way I did. And again, one of the great things, so back when I started Idealab, one of the whole reasons I started Idealab was because of the advent of Netscape and the browser. And I previously was running a company called Knowledge Venture, an educational software company, as I said, which I was distributing multimedia CD-ROM products through retailers. So I made these CD-ROM products. We worked on them for months. Then we went to Sony. We had them duplicate 10,000 copies. Then we found resellers and distributors. I met one of them here today. Actually, was distributing our products in Australia for us. Then that distributor would go to retailers, and the retailer would sell to a consumer. So consumers would show up at our store, buy our product for $39.95. We had to make 10,000 of them minimum at once, so we couldn't do lots of little iterations. And we wouldn't even know who our customers were. We had to beg them to send back registration cards to even have conversation with the customers. So Netscape comes along. There's 50 million people online in 1995. Netscape went public on my birthday, August 9, 1995. And all of a sudden, there were 30 million browser users. And I thought, this is unbelievable. 30 million people around the world that you can talk to, where you can have a one-to-one conversation with them. You can talk to not to 1% of your customers, You could talk to 100% of your customers. That was incredible. So think of all the new business you could start when you could talk to every one of your customers and iterate. And that got me very excited. But that was 1995, 30 million people. 30 million out of a total addressable market of 50 million people who had an internet connection. So fast forward to today. 2 billion people with a smartphone. It's unbelievable that you can talk to every one of those people. So what's exciting about that is you could make something that, as long as it appeals to 100 million people somewhere, if you could find those 100 million people, you could have a pretty big audience. So with Cars Direct, what I was trying to do was just find out, were there enough other people who wanted to do what I wanted to do? And in that particular case, I only was going after the US market. When I my first experiment, I was just going after the Pasadena, San Gabriel market. But as long as there were enough, you could build your business on that. So you need to make something astonishing for some subset of your users. So let me jump to another story about an MVP product that we did that didn't work out. And let me tell you how we came up with the idea, and then what our test was, and how it yielded a negative result. And oftentimes, an MVP that doesn't work out, but with some twist, can be something wildly successful. In this particular case, we haven't come up with that twist yet, but we take all the knowledge that we have from all of our failed experiments and keep them on file, because very often the new twist is either a new idea, a new technology that gets developed, and some of our ideas, in fact, you're seeing a lot of companies being executed today that were failed companies from 1999, 2000, 2001, because there's new twists. Maybe now there's enough people online, or there's faster broadband connections, or there's GPS, or there's other things. There's crowdsourcing, there's new twists in the marketplace that now might make a previously failed MVP be a possible MVP. And you really need to look at the timing of the other technologies and capabilities that are in the market to make some idea of yours really work. So InstaShock is something that we tried recently. I got excited about all the movement towards same-day delivery. Amazon moving to more same-day delivery, eBay moving toward more of that, Google's moving into same-day delivery, drones, other ways to try and get things to people more quickly. And I was trying to figure out some good ways to make 1 hour delivery, or even sub 1 hour delivery. So the 1 hour delivery idea I had was to have trucks that drive around that would be mobile warehouses, basically. So imagine a bunch of vans driving around, loaded up with convenience store items. And they would be a little bit like Uber cars that are available. You can see them on a map where they were. And you would go type in what you need, like batteries or whatever you're looking for, SD card or something. And this van would be stocked up with the most commonly used items in particular neighborhoods. And you could see on a map a little battery on Linda Vista Avenue 4 minutes away. You could click on that battery and that would show up at your house in 10 minutes, because that would be roving inventory. And those vans would go stock up on their inventory periodically from a centralized warehouse. But rather than having eBay has people going to stores like driving to Best Buy, picking up an item and driving it to you, but that's inefficient because you have to make a whole round trip just for one person. But what about if the inventory was moved mobile? So that was one idea we had. But the next idea we had that we were excited about was a little bit more like an ice cream truck, where the ice cream truck drives along and rings its bell and indicates its inventory is nearby, and then people come out from the playground or from wherever to buy the ice cream, because the ice cream truck is just moving and then people come for it. So what would be a more modern version of that you could do? So I thought about vehicles that are driving around the neighborhood, but then targeted mobile advertising that's GPS-based, that is only advertising to people that are, say, in a 2-minute radius of that truck, on a dynamic basis that this truck is moving. And therefore you could tell people, hey, you want a sandwich? It's outside. Or you're looking for batteries? Look out your window, he's standing there. We're thinking that maybe there'd be this new kind of business that you could make where there's this mobile inventory, but it's only being advertised to people right adjacent to it, and possibly even doing targeted marketing. So we were excited about that. We did a test where we filled up a few station wagons, basically, with some SUVs with some different merchandise, and we drove them around downtown, around Pasadena, and we ran targeted advertising. And we just couldn't get enough people to respond, either enough people to believe that that was actually true, that the thing was available right outside, or we couldn't figure out the exact merchandise that they would want. And we had a high click-through rate on the ads because people were curious, but not a high click-through rate on people to convert after that to actually go step outside and buy the item that was right available to them, or to have the person walk in and deliver it. So we were very excited about the idea. Here was a technology that was now possible, enabled by the GPS, and by mobile advertising that can be ultra hyper-targeted to the actual location of the vehicle, almost like a food truck moving along that was dynamically calling on people, or like the ice cream truck idea. But we just couldn't get enough response rate, and we saw that basically we could sell $2 to $5 items for between $10 and $15 of marketing cost. So that was a non-starter. And that comes back to my point before, that very often you might have an idea that's great, but you just can't drive the cost of customer acquisition low enough to make a profit. Now maybe that idea with some new twist would work. Of course, that idea possibly could work where you acquire customers for $15, then maybe if customers like it enough, they'll become repeat customers, and then you can amortize that cost over time. Now, it's very, very hard to make all your profit on a first sale. So most businesses acquire customers at a loss. You know, most businesses are willing to have a long-term relationship with you and then make that money back over time. Well, we still thought that this was a little too high, $15 to sell a $2 item, that it wasn't going to break even, so we canceled the idea. So that was an example of a simple MVP we came up with to determine not to go forward, but it's on our back burner. And we do know that there is demand for fast delivery of items, and maybe with a new twist, we would resuscitate that idea. The next one is a company, a product called HAL. This was a company I made a little bit after I graduated from college. Right when I graduated from college in 1981 was the exact year the IBM PC came out. So I bought an IBM PC to help computerize my business. And then Lotus 123 came out, and Lotus 123 completely blew me away. I had seen and heard about VisiCalc and Multiplan, but Lotus 123 was the super duper spreadsheet for the IBM PC. I only had an IBM PC with 128K of RAM and one floppy drive, but it was still amazing what Lotus 123 could do in 128K of RAM. And I had Lotus 123, fell in love with it, started using it to computerize my business, but we kept on having customers of our first templates that we made for Lotus 123 that didn't really understand how to use Lotus 123, and we thought, wouldn't it be incredible, these people who call up for customer service on how to use our spreadsheets, they're not dumb people, but they just don't understand Lotus 123 the way we do. And they're asking very simple questions like, how do I sort column A? Or how do I put in a sum of all the rows? And they basically were expressing exactly what they wanted to do, but to learn how to do, like again, now all of you who use spreadsheets today, that's laughable, those simple things, but they were describing exactly what they wanted to do, and they couldn't figure out how to do it. So my brother and I, my brother was working with me at the time, came up with this idea to make a natural language interface to Lotus 123. What about if you could take the exact question that people are asking us, like how do I sort by column A, and you would just type in sort by column A, and it would figure out what you mean by that, like what's the range you want to sort, and what does sort by column A mean, probably ascending. We could take all the things that people commonly say to one another when they want to make a spreadsheet, like if you were talking to someone over their shoulder to make a spreadsheet, let's make a product to do that. Well, that was going to be a huge project, a huge natural language recognition project. We didn't even know how to build natural language parsers or anything. We just knew how to make 1, 2, 3 macros. But we thought that might be a neat thing. So here's how we did our MVP in that case. This was back in 1984. Again, way before the term MVP, but it was basically out of necessity. We didn't know how to program a natural language interface. So we made a macro in Lotus 123 that all it did, the entirety of the macro, was page down. All it did was do page down, 20 rows at a time. And what you did, the macro had a little thing on the top of the screen that said request, : and you would type in, put the months across the top. But pretty much no matter what you typed in, all it was going to do when you press enter was page down. So after you press page down, there it was, January, February, March, April, May, June, months were across the top in row 20, but no one noticed really when it got down, page down, it was so fast. And then you'd say, put salesman, Joe, Mary, John, Hank in column A, and then page down. Sure enough, those names would show up. It didn't matter what you typed, you better type the right names because they're going to show up no matter what happens. And then we'd say, put some numbers in column A, and we'd put some sales numbers in, and then we'd say, grow sales at 10% across, page down. And all of a sudden, the spreadsheet was filled with numbers across. And then we said total all columns, and all the columns had a little dotted line at the bottom. Again, page down. And finally, graph this. And all it did was the macro, slash graph, the exact commands you need to do in Lotus 123 to make a graph. We showed this to people, and people's jaws completely dropped. And they said, that is absolutely incredible. I can't believe you can do that. I said, oh no, we can't do that yet. We're raising $150,000 to go do that. But that demo, that fake demo, was all we needed to know there was demand for something like that, and investors would actually put money into that. So we raised $150,000. It was a lot of money at that time. For us, it was the most we had ever seen. We raised $150,000. We then hired some engineers from Caltech to help us build a natural language parser to do that. It took a year to actually take that fake demo and turn that into an actual product. But we had seen so many people blown away by that fake demo that we were able to make it an afternoon, basically, because it was just page down macro. that we built that. We spent $75,000 to make the product. We spent about $25,000 to go to the Comdex trade show in Las Vegas the following January. And we were on stage, pretty much like this, with our spreadsheet up there, doing demos of typing in requests and having things happen in Lotus 1, 2, 3, and people were blown away. We got orders from distributors for the software. We were getting ready to package it and go into business. Someone in the audience, just by complete chance, happened to be the lead investor. His name was Ben Rosen. He was the lead investor in both Compact Computers and in Lotus 1, 2, 3, in Lotus, forming of Lotus. He saw it. He called up Mitch Kapoor, the founder of Lotus, and said, there's this incredible product there. Mitch called us up and said, send us the product. And we said, oh, we're kind of scared to send you the product. We're not going to do that. He said, well, we'll sign a non-disclosure agreement. We didn't even know what a non-disclosure agreement was. We'll sign a non-disclosure agreement if you can fly out and show it to us. You don't have to leave the product with us. Just do a demo for us so I can see what it was. We flew out to Cambridge to meet them, and they acquired the company for $10 million. It was a complete wild thing for us. I was 25 years old. I had no idea what had even happened, but on a fake demo with page down. Thank you. That is to raise the money to build the product, to go to Lotus, to end up working at Lotus. And I signed a 1-year contract to work at Lotus. I ended up staying at Lotus for 6.5 years. It was the greatest experience of my life, learning everything about the software industry. But it really taught me this idea about building these slim prototypes just to find out if customers even want what you have. However slim, you can figure out a way to do it. Of course, I wish I invented the term MVP or the term lean startup. That would have led to a whole different career. But I continued employing that as much as I could in future companies. Okay, now another failed MVP, PantryMate. So about 2 years ago, I had this idea for a simple way to, I saw Amazon starting to do more and more, when you check out of items that could be recurring purchases, they would say, sign up to buy this every month, like whether it's razor blades or toilet paper or other stuff for your kitchen. They give you a discount if you buy frequently, and I thought, boy, it's pretty powerful. If you could know what people buy on a repeating basis and you could get them to sign up for automatic repeat, that would be incredible. But if you sign up for automatic repeat, you often get, I have a certain coffee that we like at home, and we sign up for automatic repeat of those coffee beans. But we often either end up out of it or too many of it, because our usage is not exactly regular, and we have guests over, and wouldn't it be great if the auto repeat could know when you're empty, or know when you're close to empty? That would be really exciting. So I tried to think of some way that we could do that inexpensively. So that could either be for medicine, so you're always stocked up on Advil if that's what you want. It could be for the coffee, it could be for milk, it could be for items in the pantry. So I was trying to think of a simple add-on product that we could make for, say, sub $10, maybe even sub $2 someday, that you could affix to a product and put under a product that could basically determine when it's low, and via Bluetooth automatically send the signal to order more. And that way, it would always show up just in time. You'd never have too much, but the company who has that relationship with you would have a very valuable, long-term, lifetime value customer relationship. So my idea to do it was with a lightweight Bluetooth scale. And it would be something that you could just sit under items and in the pantry or in the refrigerator or in your medicine cabinet, and it would automatically ping when it got to a certain level. So what you would do is you would empty the let's say it was Advils. You empty the Advils to the level where you want to reorder. So let's say there's 25 Advils left and you want to reorder. You'd empty the thing to that, you stick it on the thing, you say, this is the weight at which I want to reorder, and then from then on it just gets taken care of, and it knows when it gets down to that level. And that was my idea. So I was very excited about it. I wanted that product, and we needed to find out if other people would be excited about it, if they would understand it. So the way we came up with to test it, that would actually be a real test of customers actually seeing if they would actually pay money for it, was what we jokingly call reverse shoplifting. Reverse shoplifting because we were going to bring product into the store illegally, as opposed to stealing product from the store illegally. So what we did is we took some little scales. We said they were Bluetooth scales. They weren't Bluetooth scales, but we were going to add that to it. And we opened up the packaging and changed the marketing of the product to make it look like it was this product that we described. We sealed them back up, and then we went into Bed Bath & Beyond and stuck them on the end cap. And we watched people there as they picked up the package and looked at it and tried to figure out what it was, and we saw if they were going to go check it. Of course, we were going to intercept them and say, no, this product's not available for sale yet, it's not real yet, but we just want to see would anybody even want to buy it, and then ask them. And we didn't have any takers. We had people picking it up and putting it back down, and they just didn't want to buy this product. And no matter how hard we tried, we couldn't get people to think this was an important thing. So our conclusion from that was failed experiment. People just don't want this. Like, I want this, but there's not enough other people that we can find. You're sitting in three Bed Bath & Beyonds on 3 different weekend days in different locations. We couldn't find takers. And I go back to another story, a knowledge adventure story, of sitting in the aisle where we had something similar, where we learned this about watching people in the aisle. So one year at Knowledge Adventure, and this comes back to, again, the listening to customers, but also trying to test things in a lean way. We had this company, Knowledge Adventure, making educational software. I started that company in 1991. When my son started kindergarten, I got really passionate about making great software for children to make him fall in love with learning. I had a magical 4th grade teacher that made me fall in love with learning. I was worried that he might not. So he was only 5 years old. I waved goodbye to him on the playground, and I said, I'm going to make educational software. So that's when I quit Lotus to go start this company. And I wanted to make products that made everybody fall in love with learning. So our product said for ages 8 to 108. It was all exciting, great, everybody's going to fall in love with learning. And our products were selling okay. We had Knowledge Adventure, we had Space Adventure, we had Science Adventure, we had Dinosaur Adventure. They were all selling okay, but we weren't making our numbers. We were probably not going to make it if we didn't make it this particular Christmas. We had 65 people in the company. Sales were not strong enough in Q4 to make it happen. My brother, who is also VP in the company with me, in charge of customer service, said, well, whenever we do demos, sales go up. Why don't we assign everybody in the company a different store in the Los Angeles, Southern California region, and we'll just go in and do demos. And so I got the CompUSA at Woodland Hills, someone else got one in City of Industry, Fry's, someone else got the Egghead software on Lake. We assigned everybody on the weekend 2 stores, and then we gave people Monday off to make up for the fact they had to work on the weekends, but we had to make our numbers. It was an all-out effort of the whole company. We called it Weekend Warriors. Everybody in the company had to be a warrior in one store for the 4 weekends leading up to Christmas. And when we were demoing in the ends of the aisles of the stores, our sales would go way up. And then those stores would order a lot more product. In fact, those chains would often order more for all the stores to help our sales go, and we really were almost going to make our numbers, and then we finally did make our numbers. But the main thing we learned, every Tuesday when we come back into the office, everybody would tell their joking stories about what happened in their crazy situations, because we had bridal ways in the stores. We didn't have permission to do these demos either. We would show up with a box of donuts for the security guard and a box of donuts for the manager, and just say, oh, we're here to demo, and this is the software aisle. They didn't know, we had a laptop, and we had a table, and most of the time we would work, leave ignorance if they kick us out, but we almost always were able to stay. Their sales went up, so they were happy, but we had to arrange it with corporate. And what we saw over and over again were people picking up our boxes, looking at them, moms picking up our boxes, looking at them, and putting them back down in the aisle. And we were so frustrated. Here we were, that close to a sale. This is why I did that experiment with PantryMate, which is when people pick up a product and look it over, they're really at that moment of making their purchase decision, because they're thinking they're about to buy this phone. At Knowledge Adventure, this was now 15 years earlier to the PantryMate experiment, people kept on picking up our boxes, looking them over, putting them back down, and walking away. We look at that mom and say, God, that was a perfect candidate for our product. Their kids would love our product. Why didn't they buy it? We kept on talking about that, and our conclusion was, they don't know if the product is for their kids. That's why they're putting it back. If they knew it was right for their kids, they probably would buy it. And there was no good way to do freemium software back then, no internet. This was 1991, 1992. There was no try before you buy, really. AOL hadn't done their free discs in the mail and things like that yet. So we should have come up with something like that. But what we concluded was, if parents would know it was right for their kids, they'd probably buy it. And we had this idea, let's, instead of making these general products, let's make a product called Jumpstart Kindergarten. Jumpstart First Grade. Let's make it for just one very narrow age range. Let's not say for ages 8 to 108. Let's say for ages 4 to 5. Let's go very, very narrow. But then a parent with a preschooler would say, hey, I want to give my kids a head start in kindergarten. That's going to be for me. That's for my kid. Or my kid's advanced. I should give that to him. Or my kid needs to catch up. So we went out to distributors, actually, and they all mixed the product. They said, we can't sell a product for that narrow age range. You're not going to have enough revenue, because we have to have a broader audience. And even our sales force said we can't do that. But because customers we really felt that's what customers wanted, and the parents that we talked to, that was what they wanted, we went ahead and made a prototype of that product anyway, got it in the stores, and that became our #1 seller by far. We ended up making Jumpstart Kindergarten all the way through 6th grade. We sold 20 million copies. We sold the company for $90 million. It was a wild, wild success again. It was just because we were making the wrong thing, and we saw customers putting our product down. So any way you can come up with a way to see the interface, so when your customers are picking up your product, that's incredible. Of course, now you can watch those kind of metrics with the internet, with mobile devices and so on, to really understand that better. CodeSpark, a company that we made recently, to make educational software for kids to help them learn how to code. We want to make educational software for kids for, say, 5 to 10-year-olds to help them learn the basic principles of coding by having a game, but along the way they learn basically what loops are and what variables are, and they'll come away with some of their brain a little bit wired to the principles of coding. Well, it's all in the game. It's all in figuring out, do kids want to play the game? And how do you find that out without making the whole game? If you don't want to spend $500,000 to make the whole game, you find out kids don't like it. So the only way we could come up with was to paper and cardboard blocks and physical blocks make the game up. So we tried to physically set up the game on a table and have kids come in, and we had a human moving the blocks around and moving the things around, and we had to bump things over, and we tried to simulate as much as we could of the video game we were going to make, and the loops and the way you put things in the right order by actually having physical manipulatives and watching kids play. And we iterated for 6 months until we got kids to be shrieking with glee and their parents watching as they were having fun doing that. And that's when we finally said, okay, we've come up with something that kids will like. Now let's go write code. So we didn't even write a line of code until we came up with something with cardboard and blocks that kids actually liked. Then we began writing code. And now the code has launched. It's having great success. Very early days, but we launched just about 3 weeks ago, and especially we were excited by the following thing. We wanted to make a game that kids anywhere in the world can pick up that had no words, because we wanted to make it sort of infinitely, perfectly multilingual, so that someone in China can pick it up as easily as someone in Angola, someone as the United States. And after launching in the App Store, #1 market was still the United States, but #2 market with 40% was China. And that was so exciting to us that kids in China could pick this up identically with kids in Pasadena, because we made something that was very manipulative but very understandable by the objects and by the symbols. And the company is off to the races. It's not a bona fide success yet, it's just starting, but we at least have kids loving what the product is. Now we have to see if we can make a subscription service. We have a bunch more hurdles to overcome, but that really gave us that first test by doing the manipulatives on the desk. CitySearch was a company we started early on to make websites for businesses, for local businesses, to try and give traffic to local businesses. And that was the exact case that I described earlier of, well, it's a great idea, people want them, but can we sell it for a low enough cost to make money? And we were going to sell websites to businesses, this is way back in 1995, 1996, 97, when most businesses didn't even have websites yet. We were going to make a website for them and sell it to them for between $99 and $149 a month. And we expected to have a minimum life of 6 months with them, maybe longer. If they really liked their website, they would continue with us. So we thought we would have a $600 lifetime value with each customer. We'd probably have about a $100 to $200 cost to make up that website if we set up a factory of people making up the websites. So we had to sell them that website for under $200. So we began by just testing the selling cycle, by making up one beautiful website for a business and walking down the street on Colorado Boulevard in Pasadena to merchants and trying to sell them that same thing for $99 a month. We said, your competitor has this. Would you like a website like this for $99 a month? And it was costing us about $1,000 per customer to sell the website, so way too much. So we kept on changing our sales tactics, changing the way the website looked, simplifying it, simplifying the message, improving what their benefits would be, until we finally got it down. It took us about 6 months to get the selling cost down to $200. We got the cost down to $200 to sell it. That's when we began making the websites. So we didn't even do anything on making them until we got, because in this case we were lucky that we could sell them the website and tell them we have to come back and photograph your business and come back and build the thing afterwards. But we could sign a contract with them up front for the $99 a month, which of course they could break if they didn't like it, but at least if they signed that contract for $99 a month, we knew if they were happy with what we made for them, they would at least give it a try. So we started at $1,000 selling cost, which means we're going to lose a ton of money, and got it all the way down to $200 before we started. Then we came up with metrics to figure out what cities to launch in. We came up with all these different metrics about what makes a city a good city to launch in. We ranked all the cities in America according to those criteria. You know, college town versus this population versus this type of merchants. And the cities that came out on top, Raleigh-Durham came up first. We went there right after Pasadena. Then Austin came up second. And we had a strategy rolling out in cities that was not just go for the biggest cities in the United States, because it could be too hard to do New York, Chicago, San Francisco well. We came up with these smaller towns that we could actually make a profit in to use that to raise more money and then get to the next stage. And that was how we did the MVP process with CitySearch. And then Zipline is another company we tried recently in the last year that didn't work out. And that was one, so I'm a really big fan of the product, so how we came up with the idea for it. Zipline is basically ways for lines, for restaurants, post office, TSA lines, DMV, basically how long is the wait time at anywhere else I go to besides traffic. And I'm very, very impressed with Waze. I love the product Waze. It's beautifully done. And of course, I have an incredible exit to Google, a huge exit from an Israeli company. And, but also, more than the exit, a great impact. It's a great product that touches millions of people. And that's what we always try and strive for when we make an ideal company, something that's going to have a big positive impact on the world. And I wanted to make something that would save people time. And the idea came to me once when I had raced to Burbank Airport to get on a flight. And I got there, I left early, missed taking my son to school that morning, really disappointed that I got there early and there was no line. Walked right out the gate, called my wife and said, what a shame, I wish I had known. And she said, boy, wouldn't it be great if you could just look up on the phone and see how long the wait is before you go. That could actually affect what time you leave. And I said, it'd be fantastic to have that for all kinds of places. For restaurants, some restaurants we like to go to in Pasadena don't take reservations. I wish I knew how long the line was at Houston's. I wish I knew how long the wait was at the DMV before so I really thought we could crowdsource that kind of information. So how do we test that? So we started by going to about 40 places that had long lines in Pasadena and actually hired interns to go around. Each person had 5 places, and they would go in a loop around those places and just type in the wait times, both in the evening rush and the morning rush. And then we had some people at Burbank Airport and a few other places that people were interested in. And built up an app that would basically show those wait times in a nice graph. And I thought it was also exciting because now we would show the wait times, but you could look in advance and you could say, Houston's on a Friday night. How bad is that? When does it start getting bad? So what time do I need to get there if I want to beat that rush? You know, what are the patterns at Burbank Airport of how bad the lines are? I go to Burbank Airport enough that I sort of know what those are now, but not exactly. Sometimes it's different because they change their staffing. So we started getting some users. So we made a very, very simple app that was basically just an HTML web page. We made it look like an app. It was just an HTML page that was basically taking this info from the interns that we had entering the data. And the goal was to get users, see if they liked the product, but then see if they would enter wait times, because what we needed to do was get a self-fueling cycle of people to enter the wait times to make this work in a scalable fashion, because we can't hire enough people to go to every business in America and do this. So we started getting users, and I think we had a couple hundred users who loved the product. Even in some cases where we didn't have accurate wait times, we were using wait times from the previous week, and even when they were wrong, people were forgiving of us and saying, that was still fantastic, I love it, but we didn't have anybody entering the wait times themselves. People are so different in their habits about entering the wait time when they have to actually do that effort, make that effort, even though they love the product, compared to the way Waze, and the brilliance of Waze is to see the updates on your ride, you have the Waze app open, and then you are becoming an automatic contributor of GPS data to the Waze system without having to do anything. Now, there's extra people who go for the gamification in Waze to enter when they see policemen or when they see accidents and things like that, but that's only a small percentage of the people. I think only 1 or 2% of the people do that. 98% of the people just have the map open and they're sharing data. So the brilliance of Waze was not only in how it saves time, how accurate it is, but in the way they got people to contribute in sort of an effortless way. Our idea for this company, Zipline, which was going to do the same thing but for these other establishments, didn't have an automated fashion. So we had a negative, we decided not to go ahead, but we still tried to come up with some way. Maybe there's another way we can come up with automatic data. Maybe we can plug in a Wi-Fi access point into restaurants, our own access point that doesn't give Wi-Fi access, but just looks at a ping of how many phones there are there. And maybe we can do a correlation between the number of phones that are pinging our access point and what the wait time is. But we didn't get a very good correlation of that. Then we had other ideas about serving mobile ads and looking at the density of mobile users. We didn't get a good correlation with that. So we eventually killed the idea. But you get the sense of the way we were trying to find, could we get a self-sustaining system for the lowest cost without building a whole app, just by putting some HTML simple thing in the store, just by testing it in one local region? Because the only way this was going to grow to be something like Waze was if it had scalable data contributions from the audience, and we just weren't getting there. So those are a short variety of stories, a positive and you know, both, in some cases maybe even false negatives. You know, the negatives we got might be false. There are many others where we got a negative, and maybe it only was false with new data later on. Some of the negatives we got were true false, meaning they were actually false at that time, but at a later point in time, you know, 3 years later, 4 years later, 1 year later, the world changed, broadband penetration increased, something else happened that made that if we retested at that point, it become a true positive, and in some cases we have done that. In some cases, many companies have launched now that are rehashes of old companies that didn't work, but the timing is right, and I really urge you to, again, like I said earlier, look at the timing of the marketplace around the particular idea you have. Well, I hope that some of those ideas are helpful to you. I'd like to use the remaining time to try and answer a few questions, but first, thank you again very much. It's been a great audience. best to answer you. I'll be available afterwards too. If you have a question here that you can't ask right now, you only have a few minutes, I'm bill@idealab.com. And then on Twitter, I'm Bill_Gross. And I'd love you to follow me because as I go around to conferences around the world traveling, I share everything I learned at conferences. Maybe I'd share some other tidbit that'd be helpful to you so we can communicate there too. Right here.